Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to hang with one of the best students that I've ever worked with, just in terms of this guy just worked so hard, got so much down, and has become one of my favorite saxophonists, honestly, on the scene today. His name's Aiden Seaman, and we're going to check out some highlights of a little hang that we did, talking through our experience working together when I taught him at San Francisco Conservatory of Music. I don't actually teach anymore formally in a formal, in-person type of setting, but the way that I do still teach these days is through my text lesson studio, which I think is kind of a more evolved way of working with someone, and I've really enjoyed doing it. In my text lesson studio, you can essentially work with me through text and email. I send you monthly assignments and weekly practice plans, and then we can actually be in correspondence constantly. We can talk every day, we can talk every couple weeks. It's really just whatever pace you feel good about. So it's a lot of fun, a great way to work with me one-on-one. But for several years, I taught at San Francisco Conservatory of Music. I would go out there once a month for a week. And for me, a big highlight was working with Aiden. And so Aiden in particular had a bunch of great habits that I found that really set him apart from a lot of the students that I work with. And I thought it would actually be really cool if we made available to you guys a bunch of the assignments that I gave him, so you guys could actually see the assignment mapping. It also gives you kind of a sense of what I work on with people in the text lesson studio and how that assignment mapping works. So the first habit is going to be, Aiden never questioned the process. And I think that's something that people get really caught up on. They question the process in that they ask, how is this going to make my playing better? And they get so caught up wondering about what the result is going to be. They lose track of falling in love with the process, which is so important when it comes to developing your playing. You need to really focus in on the process. That process is what's so important, and if you get too focused on the result, that's gonna be detrimental.
One assignment that I gave you that you crushed and destroyed, like you did with all the assignments, was Dexter Gordon Cheesecake in all 12 keys. I'm relearning that one right now in all 12 keys, and there are some moments where I actually feel like it feels like I never learned this in all 12 keys, even though I did. It's a particularly tricky one. That process of relearning, like a lot of times, the second time around, you get even more out of it.
Yeah, and I think there's also things about that where you're like, the things that you're learning by doing it aren't necessarily the actual solo in all 12 keys, and that's not, maybe you're not retaining the solo in all 12 keys, but you're gaining the skills of being able to transpose things,
right?
And you're gaining the skills of playing that language in different keys. And even though like maybe 2 years later you can't play the solo in all 12 keys still because you haven't practiced it in 2 years, you still have the skills that you learned from doing it, from the process of working it out and expanding your ear and all that.
Another really great habit that Aiden had and continues to have today is really exceptional focus. He never gets distracted by his phone.
It's amazing how important like a short, very focused amount of practice time can be, and how easily just like one distraction can kind of derail that entire, like, say 20-minute section of practice time. And
so true.
You're less focused even once you get back on track. And so I feel like if you're able to just like get rid of all things that could possibly distract you in that moment, at least for like a small period of time, that small focused period of time that you're able to practice without distractions is like so important. And it can be really, really helpful, even if it's short.
Totally makes or breaks a practice session if you can get in those short segments of focus.
The third habit that really sets Aiden apart that I think we can all learn from is being really proactive with whatever assignments you're working on. Aiden would always start working on assignments immediately after being assigned assignments in a lesson. So a lot of times students will wait. And I always tell my students, the most important day to work on your assignments is the day after your lesson, or the day after you receive those assignments. Right from the get-go, you want to get right into it. Because with procrastination, you know, with every day that goes by, it's harder and harder to kind of recover. So just from that first day, you want to get right into it. Aiden was always really great at that. And Aiden would actually, you know, come to me sometimes a couple of weeks before our next lesson was even scheduled. And he would say, I've already gotten through the stuff. You know, is there anything else that I should do? You know, what else do you want me to prepare?
I've always wanted to have good technique.
Yeah.
Because of the things that it allows you to do.
Right.
But I've never really wanted to have technique be my like main thing. Yeah, I've always been wanting to do something other than that. But I think working with you really helped me realize how much I needed technique to do what I wanted to be able to do. And,
yeah, that's cool.
And I think that in some ways, like, everybody really does need that base technique. Even if you don't want to be playing fast or you don't want to be playing super complicated harmonic songs or whatever, there's still so much that you get from being able to do it that you don't need to then go do it when you're performing, but the ability of doing it just gives you so much more perspective musically.
Yeah.
So I think that was something that was super important for me.
Another cool thing that Aiden would do is he would take notes on what he would notice and observe in his playing when he was playing at his best. We all have our good days and our bad days, and I think it's really cool that he would take note of what he noticed was different about his playing on his good days.
Recently I did this thing which was I've kind of been meaning to do it for a while, but I just sat down and like wrote out a list of 5 points of what I think I'm doing well when I sound my best. And so I think cool. I can't remember what all of them were, but I think some of them were kind of rhythmic clarity, intention, like following through with melodic ideas, and like surprising myself in some way. I think there was definitely one more, but I don't remember what it was right now.
That's great.
But I found, and in the last like 2 weeks, I think this was like 2 weeks ago that I did this. In the last 2 weeks, if I'm ever feeling like stuck or lost or like I don't feel like it's working the way I want it to, I can go to that list and like say, what of these 5 things is not happening right now?
Yeah.
Because I've forgotten that I like it, or because I'm in my head and you know, not thinking right. And it's been helpful to kind of have a vision of what I like and what I know I like about my playing.
Right.
And therefore, when I don't like my playing, I can figure out why.
Right.
And what I can do to kind of get back to where I feel grounded in what I'm doing.
Also, Aiden would really focus on absorbing as much information as possible. He would never limit himself. He wouldn't say, oh, I don't know if this is going to help me. I don't know if this concept is going to help me. He just soaked everything up like a sponge. He didn't hesitate based on the idea of maybe what he wanted to sound like and maybe some concept not fitting that vision of what he had for his playing.
College is a time when you should just be like soaking up as much as you can and practicing as many different things as you can, even if you don't know if they're going to be helpful down the line. Like just having as much kind of as much material or like knowledge in your kind of head that later you can pick and kind of put aside what you don't feel like is helpful, or if you don't want in your playing, you can kind of push that aside and kind of fine tune the things that you do like. But I think that at that point in my playing, like, it was just, I just wanted to have as much in there as I could so that later I could just figure out what of it I really wanted to keep. You know?
Yeah, well put.
Because if you don't have all of it in there in the first place, there's things that you're probably missing out on that you would have wanted.
Right.
But you wouldn't know.
And it was also very responsible about scheduling practice time into his day, which I think is just such an important thing if you're really serious about getting better. You're going to have to take a part of your day, 1 to 2 p.m., 7 to 8 p.m., 7 to 8 a.m., whenever it's going to be, there has to be that time just dedicated to when you're going to practice. No matter what, no excuses. Doesn't matter what phone call you get, unless it's an emergency, obviously. You know, whatever it is, you're, during that time, just scheduled to practice, and that's when you put your phone away and you focus in on your practice time.
Something that I've been realizing more and more recently is like how important that conceptual element of playing is to just like your own ability to have success and like distinguish yourself in a vast pool of like great players. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's all this work that we have to do to kind of technically get ourselves to a point of being able to play the instrument and play in the style that we want to be playing in, and like hit all these kind of markers. But at the end of the day, like that's just a stepping stone. Like being able to do that doesn't really distinguish yourself from everyone else, because most people have done the work and have gotten to a point of being able to really play their instrument. But what really like sets you aside is what you're then doing with that ability that you've developed, you know? And so I've been thinking a lot more about just what do I want to do with the ability and the like kind of technique that I've spent a lot of time developing, and what kind of music do I want to make with it.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, most people are not listening to music going, look at the technique. They're going, like, listen to the music, you know? Like what's going on here that is like moving me emotionally or just making me feel something. And that I think is just, it's like more important. It's so important to think about that and have a goal for what you want to be saying in that way.
Right.
Because it kind of gives yourself a purpose for having all this technique that you need to develop, but how are you going to use it? You know?
Yeah.
Also, Aiden was very patient. We would take on very difficult, challenging topics, and he would never feel like he was in a state of struggling. A lot of times students will get caught up in this idea that they're struggling through this difficult concept, whereas Aiden would just be patient, and he would take everything just one measure at a time. He would take everything just bit by bit, and he would take everything very slow. He never overwhelmed himself with the idea that he was struggling with something, and he always just knew that it was going to come to him in due time. And through that process, he got faster and faster, like any of us will, at ideas that are very challenging at first.
I know that I've done some stuff with kind of just with like limitations in voice leading, like playing through a song in like half notes or quarter notes, and I can only go upwards, or I can only go downwards, or I can only move in half steps or stay the same, or something like that, you know, where it just forces you to make decisions about what note would logically come next, and you're not able to always do the thing you would normally do.
Right,
you know what I mean?
So remember, when you feel like you're struggling through something, that's just a state of mind, not a state of being. It's just music. Know that if you feel like you're struggling with something, all of your heroes have struggled with that same idea. We all start from square one. What really sets apart the best of the best is not some natural talent or natural ability. It's the patience to practice skills that become commonly associated with talent. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I hope you took some inspiration from this video. For me, it was really inspiring working with Aiden, so I hope you found his story to be inspiring. If you want a mentor throughout your process of development, I would love to work with any of you guys. Make sure to check out my text lesson studio if you haven't already. We'd love to work with you guys over there, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.